I remember watching a JJ McCullough video some time ago about what it was like to live in the 90s with active awareness of the culture of the time period. At one point, he discusses that decade's phone culture, including a nifty little device known as the pager. It's basically a palm-sized notification box back when cell phones were big, expensive bricks that not a ton of people owned, rather than the pocket-sized mini-computers you're probably watching this very video on. This video actually got me thinking about Rin Daughters of Mnemosyne, a curious little late 2000s OVA exploring what the past was like and how the immediate and distant future may turn out. It's a fascinating time capsule and a story of, among other things, the fleeting beauty of life spanning 65 years across 6 episodes. What does the pager have to do with all this? You see, Mnemosyne's first 2 episodes take place in the early 90s, and in episode 2, there's a pager that one of its more important side characters, Koki Maeno, winds up using during his time as a private investigator. Throughout these 2 episodes, we get a clear view of Shinjuku through the eyes of our immortal main lead, Rin Asogi. We see an era where payphones and installed home and video phones were our main forms of immediate, long-distance communication. Meanwhile, computer monitors were these rare CRT-ass bricks, mainly for businesses in a time where the concept of something like the internet or even PC gaming was right around the corner. In these first 2 episodes alone, we get a sense that Rin's become intimately familiar with the environment she's settled down in, and that she's a worldly woman to boot. Confident, playful, calm, and lively, while knowing exactly how to get what she wants out of whoever she's dealing with. Rin Asogi is a ton of fun, even before she interacts with what makes the show what it is at its core. Not only does she have a ton of connections, each of them has significant history with her one way or the other. They could be an informant who requires sex as payment, a chief detective who's worked with her here and there, or a homeless scholar with an affinity for and extensive knowledge of stamps. Makes things pretty easy when she needs information that could lead to, say, a medical facility that's actually been running secret cloning experiments, leading to one lady essentially making a bunch of zombies on a mission to discover the secret to immortality. How's that for tampering with the sanctity of life? Heading back to the phone stuff for a second, we can clearly see the evolution of technology as early as episode 3. This episode is set in the year 2011, and already, pagers are out, and flip phones and digital student IDs are in. Though by this point, the former at least should have more or less started being on its way out. Hell, we're still seeing Rin flip through printed photos, and while I know the show itself was made right before what I'm about to say next, the start of the 2010s is the advent of smartphones becoming part of our daily lives. That's probably why they don't exist in the show. We were still in the iPod stages back then. Yeah, the first iPhone came out a year before this, but you know, that was kind of the first big smartphone. Not everyone had one of those yet. In any case, here we learn that Rin's been around for so long that she actually has to start coming up with lies and excuses to all sorts of people just to hide the fact that she is immortal. In episode 3, for example, she visits an old lady she knew from World War II, and when recognized, makes up a story about being Rin's granddaughter and that Rin died and left a message for her. Since she can't exactly tell people she's immortal, she just has to keep doing this kind of shit, even when technology catches up and can fix people's eyesight, for example. Her immortality will always revert her to the state she was when she got the fruit, as episode 3 elaborates. Most people wouldn't understand anyway. Hell, in episode 1, she tried to keep Maeno from seeing her horrifying regeneration sequence after being mutilated, as she's seen enough people run away from her that at this point, she'd rather avoid any complications or abandonments if possible. Episodes 3 and 4 take place in 2 different time periods, and already they show the cruel march of time on Shinjuku. The people Rin's work with, they've gotten older now. Their positions in life have changed. Some of them even have kids now, like Maeno. Some of them have even died, or will die, naturally or not. The only one around her that won't change is Mimi, who will always be there to remind her that vodka means water in Russian. She's fun enough too, and hell, she even gets increasingly involved in the show's dealings as time goes on. Episode 4 is when we really start getting into some speculative fiction. At the time of this video's release, we're only 2 years away from 2025, and already we can see stuff that doesn't look too far off. Virtual reality is interacting with us in a big way. All these headsets and AI programs and shit. Hell, some people are even trying to marry them. Won't be long now till someone found a way to fuck an AI girl like Maeno's son did in this episode. Still, we may have our VR chat rooms and wacky metaverse Decentraland type shit right now, but we're not quite that far. Not to the point of interacting with sentient digital VR residents and them finding a way to physically interact with us in the real world. Most we have is AI shit like Neurosama, and I'm afraid of where we are already. any further and they'll be able to hack into our surveillance systems and do all kinds of crazy sleeper agent type shit to kill people or stalk someone, like with this episode's main antagonist. And besides, we already have tons of people practically living on the internet, so no wonder we have a more physical version of that. 1.0 is the real world, 2.0 is virtual, and then there's this mythical 1.5 for those who have more or less taken their lives to the virtual world, as if SAO were real or something. Hell, Ruon, the one Mano's son's been banging, even suggests that he do this. We're not quite at the point where your average desk can be a full-on touchscreen like in this episode, but in many other ways, the show is not too far off from where we are now, or might be in 2 years. We don't really do our phones like this episode with the whole flip phone with a screen thing. Damn near nobody wants screens that small unless it's a collector or Scott the Wall is looking for a GBA micro. This then leads us to the last 2 episodes. The year is 2055. We have a 3rd generation of Mino now, and we're in that distant sci-fi shit. At least back in 2025, the outside world still looked mostly like how it does even now. The digital side of things was bleeding into reality, but they were at least still separate for the most part. Here in 2055, damn near your whole home interior can look like whatever you want. Everything is downloadable and digitally customizable to some degree, even your clothes like in Psycho-Pass. You can pull up a screen after screen after screen, and they're all just floating there, like a ton of monitors. You can even download illegal programs to physically enhance yourself too. Obviously the real world is still there. We have photos and all, like when we see what Mino's son's been up to since episode 4, and you can still seclude yourself in areas not infested by all this digital electro voodoo. There's even shit now that I don't understand, like those interactive holocubes. In any case, much like the real and virtual world, there's another side to Rin Daughters of Mnemosyne as well. One that, while initially separate from what we discussed, intertwines itself more and more and becomes core to what makes Rin the show that it is. Not only would I not be selling you an accurate picture of the show by omitting the sex that Rin is laden with, but even the nature of its toying with time would be incomplete. Fair warning if you skip past the content warning the first time. There's a fair amount of torture in this show. Every episode has it to some degree, and it's very much sexual. The show does have some restraint. It is a somewhat regulated non-hentai OVA after all, and it's not like the show's so overly self-indulgent that it becomes as crass as Happy Sugar Life or what have you. However, expect lots of gagging, piercing, both, implied rape, among other things. The show can get pretty gnarly, even as early as episode 1. By no means is this shit just vanilla, though we have plenty of that from the main lead's dealings with their information ladies alone. The sex starts as early as episode 1, but the true nature of the show's plot doesn't kick in until episode 2. You know how in shows like Code Geass, we have mystical powers being the reason why people are immortal? Well, here we have the tree of Yggdrasil. Its spores, the fruits of immortality, are spread far and wide by the wind, and whenever a woman unknowingly comes into contact with one, she cannot be killed by anything other than an angel, or another immortal, but mostly an angel. Men end up becoming angels, predators seeking to eat immortal women out, and retrieve their core spores from within them and consume them. That is how you kill an immortal. Remove her seed, devour her fruit. Even Rin can't always maintain her agency once those angels come out, as the immortal women are more or less trapped in an arousal state where they desire to be devoured by those brutes. That being said, angels also have a really limited lifespan, and they can be killed normally, so there's all that to balance it out. For most of the show, the general public seems to know pretty much nothing about any of this. Then episode 5 comes along, and 30 years after the previous one, rumors of the mythical tree and its spores have begun to spread. Outside of the rare angel sighting that makes up the murder case in episode 2, the actual information is still rather vague as far as the public is concerned. Perhaps our main antagonist, Apos, just wanted to have a little fun. Plus, Rin's still wearing her own Fruit of Immortality as a necklace after a certain incident, shall we say. There's also the matter of that giant tower of naked women you've no doubt seen from even the first few seconds of the OP. Yeah, that's pretty important in the last 2 episodes, and even get to see how Apos feeds them after 5 episodes of torturing, gagged, and bound immortals with blades and chests. This whole hentai plot does get quite bonkers and convoluted towards the end, and I wish the show did more with stories exploring the sanctity and transience of life like in episode 1. It's not like any of the action or sex is that well animated anyway. The show's production values are pretty jittery in general. Even so,
Fuck you, kill yourself. Just kill yourself. Holy shit. God, kill yourself. Oh my god. Why do you make this? Just kill yourself.
I can't help but recommend this show, in spite of any issues I have with it, and any other caveats or content warnings that might steer people away. I do feel that the reputation the show once gathered for being glorified torture porn is an exaggeration, and it only really touches upon one side of the show anyway. Still, hey, if that or any of the more sexual and mature stuff I talked about here got anyone to watch the show, then cool. I know I'm leaving out a lot of the specifics, but there's a lot of stuff to analyze without getting too granular into the plot and all that spoiler shit. Hell, I'm barely even touching upon the cast, even Rin herself. And she definitely has her fair share of fun confidants and even an entertaining rival who keeps trying to kill her every episode. Rin isn't a show for everyone, or even most. It is, however, a fascinating time capsule indicative of its era. Its OST has wistful jingles akin to the likes of Fate Stay Night, further scratching that nocturnal 2000s itch I crave. While the show never made a huge splash when it came out in 2008, it did have its day in the limelight when people discovered how weird and even somewhat torture-heavy it is. Rin Daughters of Mnemosyne isn't the most obscure anime in the world. Dig beyond the current seasonal discourse for long enough and you're almost bound to hear whispers of this show at some point. However, don't expect it to be this amazing hidden gem you'll shove down everyone's throats. Just expect a curious, one-of-a-kind high-concept OVA that deals with sex and the preciousness of life and time. I can all but promise you this, you'll never experience a show quite like this again. Also in the dub we get this.
Merry fucking Christmas!